If the witnesses have their seats, they're going to call votes any minute now, but we're going to try to get a little bit ahead and do our opening statements. The Subcommittee on the Interior, the Subcommittee on Interior, Energy, and the Environment of the Committee of Oversight and Government Reform will now come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time, which should be happening shortly after they call votes on the floor. We'll start off with our opening statements, and I'll go first. So I would like to wish everyone a good afternoon. Today, the Subcommittee on Interior, Energy, and the Environment will examine the management of red snapper in the Gulf of Mexico. Red snapper is an essential yet controversial resource for the Gulf states. Today, we'll explore some of the ongoing issues related to red snapper fishing, as well as potential solutions to these problems. We'll also look at the science and data collection associated with managing snapper and take a look at how the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, is doing. The most significant regulation of red snapper fishing first occurred in the 80s and 90s in an effort to conserve dwindling snapper population. While a significant recovery is well underway, the conservation efforts created snapper quotas and ratios that must be shared among the red snapper fishing sectors. Like many Americans, I'm a supporter of conserving our environment and national resources. There's no doubt we have a responsibility to combat overfishing of red snapper and of other species. However, we need to ask if the population data that's being used to determine these fishing quotas is accurate and if we're using sound science. Unfortunately, the answer here may be no. If it were yes, there'd not be such large discrepancies between the federal government and Gulf states over catch shares, season lengths, and snapper ratios. The quality of data from collection to interpretation drives red snapper regulation and industry along the Gulf Coast. Relying on inconsistent data for red snapper population continues to drive potential restrictions on commercial, charter, and recreational fishing in the Gulf of Mexico. The federal government has continuously struggled with managing red snapper in a fair and consistent manner. In the last few years, NOAA has published rules regarding catch estimates that have seemingly seesawed between favoring commercial anglers' interest rights and recreational anglers' interest. The federal government should not be in the business of picking winners and losers. Unfortunately, though, this is what appears to be happening with red snapper fishing. An example from 2007, when the Gulf of Mexico Fishery Management Council implemented an individual fishing quota or catch share program for commercial anglers. This program was designed to provide a steady year-round supply of red snapper that was within the federal quota. Unfortunately, less than 100 commercial anglers were allocated shares. This has resulted in a reduction of roughly 800 commercial anglers over the last decade, leaving us only about 400 today. Of those 400, about 50, and I'm using quotes here, own approximately 80% of the commercial fishery. We also face extremely short recreational seasons that can all but deny folks access to snapper fishing. Should the weather turn bad or other circumstances arise, the short season would make it impossible for some folks to take advantage and enjoy this resource. And I've got to tell you, some of my fondest childhood memories involve fishing and making sure, and I think we need to be making sure that future generations can enjoy this as well. Despite these problems, I'm hopeful we can find solutions that are both fair and beneficial for all parties involved in red snapper fishing, and I look forward to hearing suggestions from our panel today. And at this point, we'll let Ms. Plaskett do her opening statement. They have called votes, so as soon as she finishes, we'll take a recess and vote, and then come back and introduce the panel and do questions. I'll now recognize the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon to you all, and I guess that means I've got to speak really fast now.
Blessed are the brief.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and thank our witnesses for holding this important hearing. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to discuss an issue that does not get the attention it deserves. Federal law has helped save the red snapper. Before 2006, this species, prized by recreational and commercial fishermen alike, faced overfishing, a steep decline in population, and the possibility of extinction. The cooperation between fishermen and regulatory agencies within the framework of the Magnuson-Stevens Fishery Conservation and Management Act has largely brought back the red snapper. It is due to this success that we can hold a hearing today. Representing a jurisdiction located in the Caribbean, the fishing industry is an important part of our economy. both in the commercial as well as recreational sphere. However, we do not have the same issues of the Gulf of Mexico because we operate on an annual catch limit as opposed to a quota system, which is set by the National Marine Fisheries for economic exclusive zones. We do not have a formal recreational fishing program, and recreational fishermen are not required to be licensed. However, one of our main issues pertains to sports fishing, mainly sports fishing for marlins in the British Virgin Islands, where the British Virgin Islands government has increased the licensing fee so drastically that it is having a negative impact on our once thriving sports fishing industry. Perhaps, Mr. Chairman, we can work together on this issue. I'm really excited about this hearing because the protection of fish and natural environment and the balance needed for the maintaining those resources and the needs of recreational and especially commercial fishing should be addressed. I look forward to hearing from some of those voices today that are here, and I view this hearing as the beginning of a discussion on how we allow greater access to the red snapper fishery while ensuring that this important and still overfished stock continues to rebuild. Thank you.
Thank you. And it is our intention to reconvene shortly after this vote series concludes. So I would ask the members to return promptly after the vote series. We'll go on after that. We'll introduce our witnesses, hear their testimony, and go with questionings. I apologize for the delay, but the House voting schedule is about as unpredictable as the weather. So with that, the committee stands in recess, subject to the call of the chair.